Welcome to Case Modding for Noobs with Totally Lame Robot, Volume 1. This is a brief introduction to case modding that applies to not only Xbox 360, but to anything you want to customize. This is your first step to becoming less of a noob. I will be going more in depth with the processes in later videos. This video will let you know what you're about to get into. Don't expect a lot of detail in this intro, this is just to let you know what's ahead. A lot of people ask me about my mods, and I think a lot of people just don't know where to start. Before you do anything though, there's a couple of things that you need to understand. First thing is that whatever item you're modding will no longer have a manufacturer's warranty. If you mess up, or if it breaks in the future, then you're screwed. You also have to realize that you might mess things up. Things don't always go as planned, so do this at your own risk. So here's a basic overview of what you'll be doing just to apply paint. A lot of the time you'll be starting with sandpaper, especially if you're using a glossy surface. You don't always need to do sandpaper, but it usually helps. If you sand or not, always make sure that you thoroughly clean the plastic with soap and water. You want to make sure that it is completely dry before you take the next step. I usually like to let it sit overnight just to make sure. Depending on the situation, you might want to use primer at this step, or an adhesion promoter, but I'll get to those later. Next, you're going to apply the color, and then after that's dry, you're going to put on the clear coat, which protects your paint job and gives it a nice glossy finish. When applying color or the clear coat, you're going to want to hold the can several inches away, and you're also going to want to do a few light coats instead of doing one heavy coat. There are a few different brands of paint out there that you can use. A lot of people like to use Krylon Fusion for plastics. This has a really great glossy finish and it works very well, but it has a limited range of colors. I personally prefer to use Rust-Oleum when I can. I think they have a great quality paint and they have almost any color you can think of. With Rust-Oleum or any kind of spray paint that isn't intended to be used on plastics, it's a really great idea that you use an adhesion promoter. This will make your regular spray paint adhere so much better. Trust me, you really want to go out and get the adhesion promoter if you're not using Krylon Fusion. Something really important to remember when choosing your spray paint is to match the brands when selecting a paint and a clear coat. If they aren't compatible, you'll end up with crackling paint. So if you want to find these special kinds of paints, you can either go to an auto parts store, which is going to have some of the higher end quality paints. Home improvement stores usually have Rust-Oleum or Krylon, and then craft stores can sometimes have them as well. You aren't limited to spray paint though. For items like controllers that are frequently handled, I would definitely recommend using a paint that's intended for plastics, like the Krylon Fusion. The last thing you want is your paint coming off. But for consoles, you have a lot more freedom because you're not handling them as often. You don't really need to worry about the paint rubbing off when you touch it. I've used acrylic paint, clay, and markers on my mods. Don't assume that you're limited to only spray paint. You've probably seen some Xboxes with windows cut in them. Generally, these windows are cut with a Dremel rotary tool. These range in price, and they often come with several different attachments. Depending on how complex your window shape is, you might need to use a couple of different attachments. For straight lines, you can use the cutting wheel. Hold your hand steady and go very slowly and carefully. For more complex shapes, you can try using a drill bit. Drill straight down and then drag the drill bit around to create your shape. When using this method, you're probably going to need to take a file and clean up your edges after you're done because it's not always perfect when you use this way, but it's the only way to really get really complex and tight shapes. Typically, you're going to want to back your window with some clear acrylic. You can go to any hardware store and have them cut it to any size for you. Cutting a window in your Xbox gives you the opportunity to put LED lights inside. Now, I'm going to be going more in depth with LEDs in a later video, but I wanted to let you know that if you're not interested in soldering or doing all of that work, there are a lot of plug-in kits that you can buy for the Xbox 360 that don't require any soldering and they're pretty inexpensive. So you might want to look into that if you don't feel like soldering. The last thing that I wanted to leave you with was some general tips. Always do research before you start. Look into what kind of paints you would like, read about Dremels, watch tutorials, watch a disassembly tutorial, and always plan out what you're going to do. Sketch out your ideas, take measurements, and practice. Like I said, you can screw this up, so just prepare yourself. The second thing is kind of obvious, but don't rush anything. Take your time, especially when you're waiting for paint to dry or glue to dry or anything like that. If you rush, you'll probably screw things up. The next thing is also a little obvious, but you should definitely read the instructions on whatever you're going to use, especially spray paint. You might think you understand how spray paint works, but you should definitely double check to make sure that you have the proper time between the coats, and on things like the adhesion promoter, there's like specific times that you have to apply the next coat of paint. So definitely read the instructions before you do anything. The next thing is to seek help. There's so many resources online and all of these awesome online communities that you can go to and ask your questions. Don't just go into things blindly if you're unsure. The last thing is to use the right tools. You're probably going to need to purchase some special screwdrivers to open up your case. So this concludes my first tutorial. I'll be making more videos that will go more in depth about the things that I was talking about. But for now, I hope that you at least have a basic understanding of what's to come and you at least have some place to start. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later.